Hey friends, in this video I'm going to walk you through the PI planning event itself. This is the second video for the PI planning event itself, but it is as part of our PI planning for beginners series where we've been using the example for the legal digital publishing company, Justice Inc. And they are coming up to plan their quarter and we're going to focus on it. As I said, this is the second video, so if you've not watched the first video for the PI planning event, then I suggest you click on the link over here or in the description below. So this is basically a follow-on and continuation from there. And if you don't have a look at that, then you may struggle to follow along with this video. So please do make sure you've had a look at that. So in that previous video, we had our Justice Inc. teams, team pair, which we were planning for. We had two features that they brought into their planning event. One was an enabler feature for their cloud infrastructure, and the other one was the family law divorce feature that they brought in. Each of those have been split out into different stories over here and over here for the functional feature as well. Now, we planned, as I said in the last video, the team planning for the team pair, but what we have discovered is that for us to be able to deliver this feature, we also need to have two additional stories that need to be built and created, or executed rather, I should say, by another team. So let's just call them, we've called them Team Apple, which is the editorial team. They're responsible for fixing, enhancing, and adding to the data that's actually going to be worked on by this system that's actually going to be provided to their customers. And so they are actually responsible for adding the valuable data. So we're going to go and have a look and see how they do that. But before we do that, let's just recap. On day one, in the last video, we covered off most of the first day's agenda. We covered off the business and the vision. We covered off team planning 1 and team planning 2. Now what we're going to be looking at is how do we present the draft plan review. So the draft plan review is where all of the teams, when they're ready to actually show some of a glimpse of the work that they've done in day one, this is when they actually start to show the whole program, what they have done, so they can start to get that critical feedback, those comments and those questions that are so essential to making sure that we have that amazing plan. So what you'll see on your screen is the draft plan review for team pair. And what you're going to see is pair, the goals are to set up the cloud infrastructure and to test with the criminal and the corporate law data to make sure that's come through, to obtain the family law divorce data after 1930, to create this subscription service, and also to have a successful client demonstration as well. So that these things, these goals, they map loosely onto the features. They could be subset of the features. They could be even over and above the features. So for example, we don't have the client demonstration mapped out over here on the board. We need to make sure we have capacity for that if it is something that is significant as well. So the goals map onto the overall activities that the teams are actually doing, but actually they may form and probably do form a subset of the overall work that the team is actually doing. These are the things that are the most important things, the essential things that the team must do. Then the next thing the team is going to walk everyone through is through the team plan. And what you can see on the board, they do a quick high-level walkthrough of the team plan, and finally of any risks that they have. Now here's the thing that I've seen with risks is that in practice what I find is that a lot of the risks are really poorly formed. When we identify risks, we need to make sure that they are articulated well. It's really clear what the risk actually is. What is impacted by this? Why has this arisen? What is the likelihood of this shifting from a risk to an impediment? And what should our response be to that? Okay, so let's have a look at some examples of risks that we have for team pair. So the team has come up with a couple of risks over here. So let's have a look at that. So the first risk is there's a lot of bureaucracy that they've got with the government agencies, which is fine. But they need to dial it in and sharpen it up to make sure that they're clear on what does that mean? What is the impact of that, right? What does it impact? Which timelines are impacted? And how does it actually impact the overall project? So over here, we've got a statement over here that says bureaucracy with government agencies potentially impact timelines to activities which involve data transfer, etc. And then you can even make it more specific and talk about the features that are impacted. The next one is potentially a lack of current data models, right? So that, again, that's nice to have. That's nice information to have, but we need to be a little bit clearer in terms of what the impact of that's going to be. And again, point number 3, risk number 3, unclear customer expectations. Again, a little bit of background on that, always very useful as well. And then finally, you've got the architecture is complex, right? And so when we look at each of these, we're going to have a look at the first one. We're going to see, okay, bureaucracy with the government agency. What we do is we roam these, right? Now the roaming can occur at the team level and also at the program level as well. So let's have a look and see how we would roam each of these risks at the team level. And then we will kind of just apply the same principle at the program level as well. So with bureaucracy with government agencies, well, to some degree, we are going to have to accept the fact that there's bureaucracy there. But also, so we'll accept that, but actually in actual fact, we can take mitigatory responses. Like, for example, we could assign an individual to that to help with the liaison and with the interactions with that to try and help with that. Nevertheless, there's a certain amount of bureaucracy and time impact that we may not be able to resolve ourselves. So in that case, we'll just say we will accept that. Now, in the other example that we've got of our risk number 2, which is the lack of a current data model, we will say, okay, in this example, we've resolved that. How have we resolved that? We've assigned an architect to our team that's actually got that planned in to actually try and resolve that situation. So, unclear customer expectations. What are we going to do about that? Well, why has it occurred? Well, the reason it's occurred is because the customer's not been involved early enough. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that they are involved. We involve them in the system demos and we involve them at more regular frequencies in the delivery lifecycle. So in that way, by doing that, we are mitigating this particular risk. The architecture being complex, that is now owned by the enterprise architect or the architect, whoever we have assigned at this point to that team or to that train. Okay, so in this way, we've got our risks. Team pair can outline all of the risks that they've got. They have roamed them and they've clarified that they've really thought about how they're going to resolve all of those challenges that can actually impact the overall team goals and the overall program objectives and goals. Okay, so now, as you would expect, the individuals in the PI planning, they're going to comment on that, and the team can take that feedback and they then bring that in to day 2. Okay. In addition to that, after that, we've got the management review and the problem solving session. Again, the management will take a stance on terms of what the teams have actually presented to them, where they think the challenges could be. Now, typically what I find is mostly these reviews can be frequently quite uneventful, but on occasion it can cause significant challenges. I remember one PI planning that I was facilitating where a vendor decided to inform us on the PI planning day that they wouldn't have the resources available that we were expecting them to be having. So now that had a massive impact across a lot of different features and a lot of the overall goals, and we needed to do a replanning to make sure that we had catered in that reduced capacity. Sometimes things just come out of the woodwork on PI planning. Those use cases and those scenarios are where the management review and the problem solving session can actually really help with solving those things. Okay, so now once we've done that, we've now completed day 1, and now let's get ready to look at what day 2 actually looks like. Okay, so now after the management has met the previous day, we are now back in the next day. We start off, we have our coffee, a little bit of a get together, depending upon whether it's in person or whether it's remote. And then what we do is we take into consideration any feedback that we've got as a team and any planning adjustments we need to do as a collective. We have a discussion about that, and then we rock into our team planning 3. Now this is where we take into consideration all of the changes that we need to do, but also now how we actually start to look at our cross-team dependencies. Because so far all we have done is we've done individual team planning. So over here we want to get our program dependency board ready, and we also want to have a look at creating our finalized team sheets as well. So let's have a look and see how we can take these inputs from a team pair and also team Apple, and how we can actually create our outputs for this session. So let's just dial back a little bit. If we looked at the features that we needed to actually deliver, what we have is we've got 5 features altogether. I've grayed out the features that we're not going to be discussing as part of this exercise. Just to keep things simple, we're looking at just 2 features. So one is the cloud infrastructure and the other is the family law. Now for both of these features, to deliver both of them, we need 2 teams. We need team pair and we need team Apple as well. So let's now have a look and see how we actually do the planning. So on your screen, what I have done is I have represented the program dependency board for these 2 teams. And what it shows is, it shows that basically we've got team pair, which if you remember from the last video, the enabler stories finished in sprint number 2. So over there, we're showing the feature over there as being finished over there. Over here, remember, we're not demonstrating, we're not showing all of the user stories. We're showing the user stories where there is a dependency. Okay, so you can think of this as the master and the team planning as the detail. And so once we do this, what could happen is that there's a negotiation that takes place between the teams and they might need to juggle things around, and that's perfectly normal for us to do. So let's have a look at this now. So we've got team pair over here, and in the first sprint, they got the family law data integration story ready. Now, once they've done that, the team Apple, which is responsible for the editorial side of things, for adding the data, fixing the data, and enhancing the data, they were then able to actually take divorce law data and they were able to update that and to enrich. Then what they did is in the subsequent sprint, they started to add further commentary onto the case law to give their viewpoints in terms of how a lawyer could interpret that data, as an example. Okay. Now, once that was done, this feature is owned by team pair. That information was actually then all collated and taken by team pair, and they did a check to make sure all elements of the feature was ready, and they committed to doing that by sprint 4. Now, by doing that, we can actually start to see the interaction and interrelationship between the different teams. You can actually see really clearly where the dependencies actually are, and in that way you can actually manage them quite effectively as well. Now, the important thing is to remember is that each of the team plans on day 2 may shift, because once you've had this interaction, you may find, for example, that they may need the systems ready earlier, or there may be other constraints over there that may actually mean that we need to the priorities as well on the team plans. So you need to just make sure that those are updated. Okay, so once we have that, now what we have done is we have actually created our dependency board, we have adjusted our team plans, and now what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are in a position to actually complete our team sheet. We actually do a final review where we would actually walk through all of the program goals. We would take the team goals and we would, all the different team goals, would bring them together and we would display them as program goals. We would then walk people through the program dependency, and also we may give another opportunity for the teams to give quick highlights. Now, what I find in practice is if you've got 12 teams on your Agile release train, even if you give them 5 minutes, that's an hour long. And what people tend to do is they tend to start to glaze over a little bit. So what I think is typically useful, they've gone through the team plans on day one. So I suggest to just do highlights. What are the changes that have occurred in day two? Is there anything that is really important that you need to call out that makes any material difference? Now, in terms of the program risks, very similar to the way in which we roamed the team risks, you would roam the program risks as well. So I would say that they need to make sure that you create a guide for your teams to make sure they understand how to raise and create effective risks. First of all, make sure that they differentiate between team level risks and program risks, and only bring the program up to the program risk board as well. Okay, be clear which team has raised those risks and which individual, because what will actually happen is you may find that you need to ask clarifying questions, and it's really useful to make sure you've got to know who's actually put that information over there. If you imagine you got 100 people there, anyone could have put that risk up on the board as well. Now, what I find in practice is that roaming the risks as a collective group is quite a chore. And so now you need to decide. I would do a trial once and see how you find it's valuable use of everybody's time to roam the risks with everybody there. Then okay, fine, go ahead. Otherwise, consider doing it in a separate session with just the key individuals that you think are needed over there. Or you could even break out and do some of the risks in parallel as well and have different sessions going on. However you wish to do it, make sure that you do it and you give it a lot of emphasis as well. Now remember, if you think about it, if you've got a plan that is clear, if you've made sure you have looked at the capacity and you've taken into consideration what you're able to do in the previous PIs, you've done that and you've done that well, then the thing that gets between you and the goal is actually the risks. So if you can sharpen the risks and make sure that you are clear on who's going to resolve those, who is owning those, what your mitigation plan is, whether they're resolved or not, or indeed whether you're accepting them and they're not going to make a difference on the team objectives. Whatever your approach is, if you're really clear on that, then the chances of you meeting your goal are really, really high. So I hope you found that useful. In the next video, we're going to cover off the PI confidence vote, which is a very interesting ceremony that happens towards the end of PI planning. I'm going to walk you through different options on how you can do that. And so I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care and see you soon. Goodbye.